Welcome dear students for HSC online lecture initiative taken by Shet Vidya Mandir English High School and Junior College of Science and Commerce. I am Ms. Ragini Singh, Assistant Lecturer of Biology, and today we are continuing with our module Respiration Part 2. In this module, we are going to study the detailed mechanism process of how respiration takes place. Before I proceed, I request you all to please sit with your notebook and pen and take down the important points. In the last module, we studied the definition of the respiration and the respiratory organs involved, and today we are going to study the mechanism of the respiration. As already stated, respiration is a biochemical process because it takes place in the cell and it is a chemical equation. Respiration is a biological process involving exchange of gases between atmosphere and the lungs, and it results in the formation of ATP. And during this process, it includes the following steps: breathing, external respiration, internal respiration, and cellular respiration. There is a small difference between breathing and respiration. Breathing means it's just a normal exchange of gases taking place, whereas respiration means there is always the involvement of the ATP. Breathing. It's just a physical process by which exchange of gas, that is when you inhale, you take in oxygen, and when you exhale, you give out the carbon dioxide, and this simple process is called as breathing. It involves inspiration, that is taking in, and expiration, that is giving out. What is the difference between inspiration and expiration? Now when you inspire, when you inspire, there is a little amount of energy also which is involved, and that's why it is called as active process. Active process means it is going to involve the formation or the use of the ATP. Expiration is a passive process. During inspiration, there is a contraction of the intercostal muscle. Last module we studied what do you mean by the intercostal muscles. These are the muscles which runs between the ribs, and relaxation of intercostal muscles takes place. In case of expiration, relaxation of external internal costal muscles and contraction of internal intercostal muscles occur. Now when you basically inspire, everybody just inspire, you will see that your rib cage is moving forward and outward, whereas when you just release the air, your rib cage goes downward and inward. What happens to diaphragm? Diaphragm contracts and become flattened, whereas when you give out the air, the diaphragm relaxes and it becomes dome shaped. Increase in volume of the thoracic cavity takes place in inspiration, but obvious if you are inspiring the air, the volume inside the thoracic cavity should increase so that the air from outside is going inside. Once the air is already inside in the thoracic cavity and you are releasing the air, the volume of the thoracic cavity has to decrease. During inspiration, air pressure in lung is less than atmospheric pressure, whereas in expiration, air pressure in lungs is greater than the atmospheric pressure, because the rule simply states that from higher level to the lower level, and that's the reason during inspiration air pressure in lung is less, and that's why the air moves from outside to inside, and exact reverse we can see in case of the expiration. In inspiration, intake of air is into the lungs, and expiration, expulsion of air is from the lungs. Look at this diagram of inspiration and expiration. Here you can see the air is moving inside, diaphragm is contracting, it basically becomes flattened, this intercostal muscles, and whereas when you see this ribs, it is moving upward and forward. Exact reverse you can see in case of the expiration. Here the diaphragm is contracting, here the diaphragm is relaxing. Thoracic cavity, that is the volume will increase, whereas here the volume will basically decrease. The pressure over here in the lungs is less, the pressure in this case is more. So this is a simple and a complete process of breathing that involves inspiration and that involves expiration. Now what is external respiration or exchange of gases at the alveolar level? It involves the four process, out of which the first process we studied, and that was the breathing. Now the second one, that is the external respiration. The alveolus, that is the grape-like structure, we saw it in the last module. The individual unit is called as the alveolus, and this alveolus is consisting of the simple squamous epithelium which is resting on the basement membrane. It is associated with a dense network of capillaries, that is with the blood vessels, one of the blood vessels, where arteries is broken down into arterioles and arterioles is further broken down into capillaries. The capillary wall is made up of simple squamous epithelium and it is also resting on the basement membrane. If you see, these are the 2 points which is common: alveolus, simple squamous resting on basement, capillary, simple squamous resting on basement membrane. Both the layers have similar structure and are thin walled. Together they make up the respiratory membrane through which exchange of gases takes place between the alveolar air and the blood. Let's understand diagrammatically. This complete structure is the capillary consisting of the blood, and this internal part is the alveolus. If you see the alveolus made up of the simple squamous epithelial cells, and whereas when you see the capillary, it also consists of a simple squamous epithelium cell where the oxygen is entering and the carbon dioxide is releasing out. And this way the exchange of gases takes place where the oxygenated blood is getting converted into oxygenated blood. What is pulmonary volumes and capacities? Lung volumes. In lung volume, the first volume that consists of is the tidal volume. All these terms are very simple. It is the volume of air inspired or expired during normal breathing, and it is 500 ml. It means when you are just sitting and you are doing the normal respiration, that is the normal breathing you are taking, not respiration, a simple breathing, you are inhaling and you are exhaling, that is called as the tidal volume and it is 500 ml. Inspiratory reserve volume, the maximum volume of air or the extra volume of air that is inspired during forced breathing in addition to the tidal volume. It means you forcefully inhale the air. When you are sitting, you just take a very forceful inspiration, and when you take that forceful inspiration, it is called as IRV, that is inspiratory. It means when you take the forceful inspiration, it is called as the inspiratory reserve volume. Its value is 2000 to 3000 ml. Expiratory reserve volume, the maximum volume of air that is expired during forced breathing after normal expiration. As you take a forceful inspiration, similarly you give out the forceful expiration, that is the forced air is being thrown out of your lung, and its value is 1000 to 1100 ml. Dead space, the volume of air that is present in the respiratory tract, that is from nose to terminal bronchioles, and bronchiole is a structure which is present in the lungs but it is not involved in gaseous exchange, it is 150 ml. Residual volume, the word residual means left over, the volume of air that remains in the lungs, and dead space. And what does dead space consist of? From nose, right from the nose till the bronchioles, even after maximum expiration. It means when you are giving a forceful expiration, whatever the amount of air is left, it is called residual volume, and it is 1100 to 1200 ml. Lung capacities. Total lung capacity, the maximum amount of air that the lungs can hold after a maximum forceful inspiration, and how much it is? 5200 to 5800 ml. What is vital capacity? Vital means it's an important. The maximum amount of air that can be breathed out after a maximum inspiration, and for that you need to add total volume, inspiratory reserve volume and expiratory reserve volume, and it is 4100 to 4600 ml. Look at this structure, or I can say the diagram. This complete is the total lung capacity. Inspiratory reserve volume, forceful inspiration. This is the expiratory, that is the forceful expiration. This is the vital capacity, where you are actually totaling the tidal volume, normal breathing, IRV and ERV. So when you add these three things, you will get the vital capacity. And after the forceful expiration, whatever is left, that is right from the nose till the lungs, is called as the residual volume. Very important terms, all these things. Now when you talk about the internal respiration, what is internal respiration? We already studied what is breathing, external respiration, and now the internal respiration. See, for the respiration there are two main important things that is involved. One is carbon dioxide, another is oxygen. Oxygen rich blood is called as oxygenated, and the oxygenated deficient blood, that is the less supply of oxygen and more supply of carbon dioxide, is called as the deoxygenated blood. The very first step in case of internal respiration is transport of oxygen. Of the total oxygen transported, only 3% is transported in dissolved state by the plasma. The remaining 97% is bound to hemoglobin present in the RBCs. Our blood contain two components, that is, one is the plasma, another is the serum. We already studied this in circulation chapter. The hemoglobin, which is rich in iron, it acts as a respiratory carrier and it binds to the oxygen. Theoretically, one molecule of hemoglobin has 4 Fe, each of which can pick up a molecule of oxygen. If you see this equation, hemoglobin combines with the 4 molecules of oxygen and it gives, or it forms, oxyhemoglobin. Oxyhemoglobin is transported from lungs to tissues, where it is readily dissociated to release oxygen. Once the body is rich with this oxygenated blood, it has to supply to each and every part of the cells, that is the tissues. This oxygenated hemoglobin will dissociate to form Hb, that is the hemoglobin, and 4 molecules of oxygen. But the degree of saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen depends upon the oxygen tension. That 100% saturation is difficult. It's not possible to give the 100% saturation. Maximum saturation that goes is 95 to 97%. It at degree of saturation decreases with drop in PpO2. This begins the dissociation of HbO2. At 30 mm hemoglobin, only 50% saturation can be maintained. So it entirely depends on the oxygen tension. Let's understand what is oxygen dissociation curve. It is a relationship between oxygenated hemoglobin saturation and oxygen tension. This oxyhemoglobin dissociation is a sigmoid curve. If you look at this curve, it is basically a sigmoid curve where you can see this S-shaped structure, and it shifts towards the right due to increase in H plus concentration. Now please pay attention over here. Oxygen hemoglobin dissociation is a sigmoid curve. This dotted line over here represent shift towards the right side and shift towards the left side. When there is increase in H plus concentration, means when there is an increase in acid concentration, increase in carbon dioxide concentration, rise in temperature and rise in DPG, that is 2,3 diphosphoglycerate, formed in RBCs during glycolysis. This glycolysis we have studied in 11th standard. And when this condition takes place, the oxygen dissociation curve is shifted towards the right side. Whereas if you see the opposite condition, that is lower CO2, higher pH, that is decrease in H plus concentration, lower temperature, the curve will shift towards the left side. So this is oxygen dissociation curve, relationships showing between the saturation on y-axis and oxygen tension on the x-axis. What is Bohr effect? It is a shift of oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. Whenever there is a word oxyhemoglobin, it clear-cut indicates combination of hemoglobin with the oxygen due to change in partial pressure of carbon dioxide in blood. Look at this. This is the Bohr effect. On y-axis you can see hemoglobin, oxygen percentage saturation, and on the x-axis you can see the oxygen pressure measured in terms of Hg. This is again a bit of the, you can say, a saturation point which is showing over here. Initially it is increasing and then it comes to this saturation point. On the left side it indicates lower CO2 concentration, that is high pH. On the right side it indicates high CO2 concentration, that is low pH. And center line indicates normal CO2, that is the normal pH. This part represents the body tissues and this is the lungs, that is alveoli. So this is the Bohr effect. Haldane effect. All this effect, the name was given after the discoverer of the scientist. Oxyhemoglobin function as an acid. It decreases the pH of blood. Due to increase in number of H plus concentration, the bicarbonate changes, that is HCO3 changes into water and CO2. In the lungs, especially in the alveoli, where the oxygen is high and CO2 is low, oxygen will bind with the hemoglobin because our body requires the oxygen and not the carbon dioxide. But in the tissues where oxygen concentration is low and CO2 is high, the hemoglobin does not bind to the O2. It releases the O2 for diffusion into the tissue cells, and thus tissue cells can utilize this oxygen for their functions. Look at this Haldane effect. Again the same graphical representation, that is increase in pH, decrease in DPG, decrease in temperature. The curve will shift to the left, whereas decrease in pH, increase in DPG and increase in temperature, the curve will shift towards the right. Whereas in case of Bohr effect, Bohr was entirely depending on the concentration of carbon dioxide. That's why it was called as the carbon dioxide shift. I hope this Haldane effect is clear to you all. The second in this case is, that is transport of carbon dioxide, that is in case of internal respiration. When you talk about the transport of carbon dioxide, we know that oxygen has been utilized by our body cells and tissue, and now it's a time for the carbon dioxide to be released from the body. Carbon dioxide is readily soluble in water and it is transported by RBCs and plasma in three different forms. Very first, by plasma in solution, that is forming the 7%. 7% of carbon dioxide is transported in a dissolved form as carbonic acid, which will break down into carbon dioxide and water. This is carbon dioxide and water combining to form carbonic acid, and carbonic acid breaking down again to form carbon dioxide and hydrogen. Second is by bicarbonate ions, which count to be 70%. Nearly 70% of the carbon dioxide released by the tissue cells diffuses into plasma and then into RBCs. In the RBCs, oxygen combines with water in presence of zinc containing enzyme called as carbonic anhydrase, which is a very important enzyme to form carbonic acid. This carbonic anhydrase enzyme is found only in RBCs and not in plasma. The rate of formation of carbonic acid inside RBC is very high as compared to its formation in plasma. Very important enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. Carbonic acid is the unstable and it dissociates into HCO3 minus and H plus in presence of this enzyme carbonic anhydrase, abbreviated as Ca, leading to larger accumulation of this HCO3 inside RBCs. Look at this equation. Carbon dioxide plus water forming H2CO3, that is carbonic acid in presence of enzyme carbonic anhydrase, but carbonic anhydrase is very unstable, so it will immediately dissociates into bicarbonates and protons. Now what is Hamburger's phenomenon and what is chloride shift? If you look in the last PPT, that is this HCO3 minus is moved out of the RBCs. This would bring about imbalance of the charge inside the RBCs. To maintain the ionic balance between the RBCs and plasma, chloride will diffuse into RBC, and this movement of chloride ion is called as chloride shift or Hamburger's phenomenon. This bicarbonate then comes into plasma, joined to either sodium ion or potassium ion, forming sodium bicarbonate or potassium bicarbonate to maintain the pH of blood. So HCO3 minus combines with Na plus to gives you sodium bicarbonate. H plus is taken by the protein, that is hemoglobin. This hemoglobin will combine with protein to form reduced hemoglobin because there is an addition of the H plus proton. This proton is expected to lower the blood pH. Always remember, higher the proton concentration, lower will be the pH of the blood. But they are buffered by hemoglobin by the formation of reduced hemoglobin, if you see in the last reaction. Look at this equation. In this equation you can see that H plus and bicarbonate ion, reversible reaction forming carbonic acid, again reversible, combining with carbon dioxide or water or dissociating to form carbon dioxide and water, of course in the presence of an enzyme carbonic anhydrase. C1, that is by red blood cells. That is 23% of the red blood cells. How does it dissociate or how does it release the carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide combines with amino group of the hemoglobin and it forms a loosely bound carb amino hemoglobin. Remember, carbon dioxide binds with amino group of hemoglobin and it forms carb amino hemoglobin, but the bonding is not that strong. This molecule readily decomposes in region where partial pressure of carbon dioxide is low in alveolar region, releasing the carbon dioxide. Of course, if the pressure is low, the release will always go from high pressure to the low pressure. Hemoglobin combines with carbon dioxide to form carb amino hemoglobin. So this way the three parts of the internal respiration is completed. Now the fourth one, that is the cellular respiration, which means the respiration taken in the cell, that is ATP utilization. It is the last step taking place inside the cell where food is oxidized and ATP is generated. It can be shown by two steps: oxidation, that is involvement of oxygen, breaking down of complex organic molecules into simple inorganic molecules with the release of heat energy, Look at this formula. Glucose combining with the oxygen gives you carbon dioxide plus water plus ATP. And in case of human beings, the ATP that is released is 38 molecules. Phosphorylation, that is the formation of the ATP. It involves trapping of the heat energy in the form of high energy bond of ATP. ATP, full form adenosine triphosphate. Already we have put more focus and we have studied in detail in 11th standard related to ATP. Is very important to carry out all the vital means important life processes, and is so called the energy currency of the cell. And whereas the organelle which is generating this energy currency is the mitochondrion. ADP, when combines with inorganic phosphate plus 7.3 kilocalories the energy, it gives you ATP, and this process is called as phosphorylation. In 11th standard we studied in the chapter of photosynthesis about the phosphorylation, and when there is involvement of the sunlight or light, the process turns out to be the photophosphorylation. I hope this complete mechanism of respiration, including breathing, internal respiration, external respiration and cellular respiration, that is involvement of ATP, is very clear to you. This is very important topic from both board point of view as well as entrance point of view. Your assignment is to study this mechanism of respiration in detail, and please have a writing practice of this. I hope you have understand this module, and thank you for attending this module.